And our next presentation is Emre Dağlıoğlu's presentation, but unfortunately he is not with us today. Instead, he recorded his presentation. But let me first introduce him with two sentences to you, and later I'm going to try to start up the recorded presentation. And Emre Dağlıoğlu has received his BA in Business from Middle East Technical University in Ankara in 2009. He received his MA degree in Cultural Studies from Bilgi University in 2015, and he is currently a doctoral candidate at the Institute of Holocaust and Genocide Studies of Clark University. And the title of his presentation is September 12th Regime and the Reshaped Identity of Armenians in Turkey.
Merhabalar. Öncelikle video konferans.
Hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizing committee for allowing me to and giving me the opportunity to participate via VC. The story I'm going to tell is, it starts in 1965 for those other than Armenians who have large gaps in their memories. With the start of genocide commemorations and the awakening of a memory, shocked Turkey after a long break of 50 years. Turkey was really undecisive about how to react politically. And the general overall response was indifference. This apathy triggered another way of seeking justice. In 1973, in Santa Barbara, USA, Gulbenkian killed two Turkish diplomats, and prior to this attack, he sent a letter to the newspaper in which he said that he chose the diplomats as a target because Turkey would not recognize the genocide, and that other Armenians, he calls out to other Armenians to join in this fight. Yanukyan's call echoes in Lebanon in 1975. Asala and the Justice Commandos of the Armenian Genocide organizations are established. Along with that, a second shockwave hits Turkey. On October 1975, first in Vienna and then in Paris, two attacks by the Justice Commandos and in the deaths of two Turkish diplomats. And from 1975 until September 1980, these two organizations hit Turkish targets over 70 times. And the September 12th regime comes to the aid of the state's helplessness in this matter. With the military regime, the 65 years of genocide denial has become institutionalized within the state. The Armenian issue is used as a tool to legitimize the coup. As Kenan Evren said numerous times, the incapable civilian leaders prior to September 12th and the anarchist youth who fall into a fight between left and right, the state has been put in a weak position, which gave courage to Armenian terrorists and the diaspora. And within this context, the Armenian issue is detached from all its historical context and taken as a security issue. And this official discourse is created by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and universities, and it's disseminated from a single source. And the September 12th regime has an effort to sway public opinion within the country as well as without, and the pressures on Armenians in the country are increased. The clear difference between the good Armenians in the homeland and the bad Armenians overseas are sharpened by the state's hand. And with this emotional and ideological clamp, there was a new Armenian identity born from this in the 80s. There were four prominent figures that were on the Turkish newspaper headlines. The first one is priest Manuel Yargatyan. His spiritual name is Manuel Yargatyan, but his actual name is Hayko Eldemir. He's a priest born in Istanbul, and in 1980 he has served in the clergyman's school and Armenian Patriarchate in Jerusalem. And about a month after the coup, he comes to Turkey for a brief visit. And on October 10th, 1980, while passing through security controls with students that he's taking with him to Jerusalem, he's taken into custody. The reason is a tip about him. And there's a strong belief that this tip-off came from the Armenian community. Yargatian and the accompanying children are questioned with the suspicion that he's taken the children to raise them as terrorists, and he's arrested. And along with known figures of the Armenian society, about 10 people are taken into custody within the scope of the same operation who are helping children go abroad and study. These people are tortured for about a month, and they're questioned on issues that do not pertain to them. And Yargatian, at the end of the month of November, along with allegations that he has organic ties with Asala, whereas everybody else is released, Yargatian is still kept in prison. And the way Yargatian was portrayed in the media was that while he was trying to come into Turkey from the Syrian border with a fake passports with 2 pistols, 3 hand grenades, and secret documents, so an Asala militant. His trial begins on May 1982, and the prosecutor has found him guilty on the charges of carrying out intensive activities during his term in Jerusalem against Turkey and Turkishness, and trying to cooperation with armed murderers who are trying to pit Turkish and Armenian societies against each other, and naming his dog Atatürk. But only the first allegation is in the prosecutor's accusation in the end, and he is charged with 6 years in prison. And what is meant by propaganda against Turkey is that he participated in the April 24th commemorations in Jerusalem, but when the ambassador to Belgrade, Galip Balkar, is killed by the justice commandos, the judge almost, as in retaliation, increases the sentence to 14 years. And then Yargatian is completely isolated from the Armenian community. He can get in touch with very few people. And after he's released in 1986, he goes to the Netherlands. And someone who has a similar story to Yargatian is Pastor Hrant Küçükgüzelyan. He's the pastor of the Gedikpaşa Armenian Protestant Church, and he works on the Armenians remaining in Anatolia after the genocide with regards to them preserving their identity. In 1957, he sets up a Badenegan Don youth home, where he teaches Christianity and Armenian culture to young children. He brings in from Anatolia to Istanbul, and in 1963 he starts building Camp Armen, the summer camp of this initiative. And often he falls into trouble with Turkish bureaucracy, and during that Küçükgüzelyan chooses not to remain quiet and goes to the Ministry of Interior Affairs, and often complains in writing about the working mechanisms. And he's taken into custody, and the price for that is being taken into custody in 1981, and the initiative that he started had to stop its activities. Küçükgüzelyan is also tortured under custody, and the accusations against him are carrying out Armenian propaganda with racist purposes towards crushing national sentiments, and it is said that he tries to bring in Turkish orphans from Anatolia to Istanbul and instigate Armenianism and communism in them. And he makes the headlines with the enemy of the Turks, the Armenian that is the enemy of the Turks. And 28 of his students are called into court as witnesses, and Hürriyet Daily reports this as he speaks Armenian at church with these innocent boys. And then, due to a lack of evidence, it's a mistrial, and he's released in 1982, and then he goes to France. The third figure is Levon Ekmekçiyan. On August 7th, 1982, he's one of the two militants, Asala militants, that carried out the Esenboğa airport attack in 1982. The other militant, Zohrab Sarkisyan, passes during the attack, and Ekmekçiyan is taken into custody wounded, and the process that awaits him is to be the material to Turkish counter-propaganda. On September 7, 1982, he is sentenced to death in a single trial, and it resonates within the press. He says that he is regretful, and he says, Turks are not the killers, we are. I accept the death penalty not once but tenfold. I came here brainwashed with the craven Asala's communist teachings, but now I understand how ridiculous and wrong belief I had. Turks are the only people that love Armenians, and the press follows how this trial is perceived or not perceived abroad, and it's in the next few days it's always in the news how the foreign media reports this. A few days after the trial, a bilingual letter is found in Ekmekçiyan's cell, which they claim that he wrote to Armenians, and what he says to Armenians is, I've lived with the Turks who you said were our enemies, and I've seen that Turks are not our enemies. Our enemies are elders and those who wrote our history. Believe this and turn back from the wrong path you follow. Live as brothers with the Turkish nation who loves you and who wants the best for you. And my second and most important wish is this: resist the dogs who infiltrate us and cleanse them from amongst us. Before the New Year's, Ekmekçiyan would be put on TV and talk about how good and compassionate Turkey has been to him, and how Asala is following a wrong path, and how it's trying to fool Armenians. This propaganda would not end with his execution on January 29, 1983. According to newspaper articles, Ekmekçiyan's last words were, "May the Turkish nations and my family forgive me, and goddamn Asala who fooled me." The fourth figure is Artin Penik, who was a tailor getting by in Istanbul, an Armenian tailor, until the Esenboğa attack. 3 days after the attack, on August 10, 1982, he lights himself on fire on Taksim Square to protest the attack, and according to his own statement, he wants to die before Atatürk, whom he admires and was a big fan. 3 days ago, where the newspaper headlines were filled with hatred toward Armenians, where this time our Armenian citizen lit himself on fire, and noble rebellion and shame on you dogs. That's how the headlines change. And I'd like to draw attention to the possessive ad here, our Armenian citizen. I protest you in the name of the Patriarchate and the Armenians in Turkey, and I light myself on fire, he says on his suicide note, and he says, the killers of Asala, you are the thongs of imperialists and international communists. You've misinterpreted history and you've mistold it. That hundreds of thousands of people died because of imperialist plays. There are only a few thousand Armenians here. Do you want to destroy them as well? This act obviously draws attention from a very broad base of crowd, and it becomes a role model of the Armenian identity that Turkey wants to draw attention to. And within 3 days, he is the subject of 25 columns, and he is declared the symbol of Turkish-Armenian peace. He is visited by state authorities in the hospital where he's receiving treatment, and in one of these visits, the Armenian Patriarch Shnor Kılıçdağı was one of the visitors, and Kılıçdağı declares him a hero who displays Armenian displeasement against vicious murders. Penik, who passes away on August 15th, his funeral was held at the Surp Asvadasin Church in Kumkapı, and representatives of the government and many citizens of Turkey participate in the processings. The crowd is so big that it fills the Patriarchate street. Yargatyan, Küçükgüzelyan, and the other prominent Armenian figures who are taken into custody with them. This is a contradiction to their loneliness, their isolation. There are four very different characteristics of these four figures, of course, but when they all come together, I think it shows the new boundaries that the September 12th regime wanted to draw for the Armenian identity. With the threat against the state, I mean, these boundaries are drawn with what Armenians shouldn't be. For example, the Argatyan shows that participating in the commemorations is an open crime, and that ties with the diaspora are a very strong threat. The other thing we understand is that the state established a tip-off mechanism within the Armenian community, and anybody that they consider dangerous is a politics of fear has been successfully implemented, which would lead those Armenians who would be considered a threat into isolation. And also, through state bureaucracy, not having a serious issue with state bureaucracy, or when you do have an issue with it, you shouldn't show the courage to complain about that. This is a clear statement of that. Ekmekçiyan is, of course, an intimidation to the outside world, and besides that, it's a proof of how Armenians can be used for propaganda in other ways. In this sense, the compassion shown to even an Armenian terrorist is shown to the outside world, and hearing the facts from his mouth. And Artem Penik, in quotes, as a dead Armenian, is displayed as a clear role model for Turkish Armenians. In this clamp of doubt and utilization, Turkish Armenians have been imprisoned inside an identity which has been drawn with lines thicker than ever before by the Turkish military regime. These lines, these boundaries, include absolute distinction and differentiation from harmful and threatening Armenian diaspora, and isolating suspect Armenians within their own community, and absolute denial of the Armenian genocide. Thank you.